So today I want to talk about that annoying hip snapping, popping that you can get in your hips, specifically when doing, ab exercises and doing leg drops, leg extensions, different things like that. And so the other day we had posted a video on here and I was talking about it and showing an exercise and what to do about it. So today I want to break it down a little bit more because we had a great question that was asked. And so if you don't know what that hip snapping or popping is, right? It's like, so if you can visualize, right, on your back, you're going to do like say crunches or you're going to do leg drops, right? And so usually what happens is as that leg is lowering, you'll get to a point where all of a sudden you feel like that clunk or you hear it, right, in your hip. And so that's telling you that something's not fully aligned or we are missing some strength and stability to work through that range of motion. So the question that was asked, which was a great question, and I wanted to talk about this and dive into this, was, okay, so Erica, I get that that's happening, right? So my advice was, what do you do? Well, first off, we need to shorten our range of motion because we need to work to strengthen and create more stability for our pelvis and for our hips so that as time goes, we can create better stability to increase our range of motion. And the question was, okay, well, is this something I just have to live with? And basically shortening the range of motion is does that do anything? Right? Absolutely it does. So that is one foundational thing that I teach a lot of. I teach it a lot through core rehab. I teach it in my core studio workout app. I teach it in prenatal. I'm always talking about it on coaching calls. Because here's the thing, we've been so ingrained to, go big or go home and have this really big range of motion. And again, if we're thinking leg drops or straight leg extensions and things like that, and we think, oh, if we go farther down, we're going to be challenging and making our abs stronger. Okay, maybe, but at the cost of what else in your body that you might actually be causing more pain and dysfunction. So if we're hearing or feeling that clunk of the hip, right, that's your body telling you that there's something misaligned or not strong enough to be able to keep and work through that range of motion. So the question that I want to ask you is, why would you keep doing that, right? We don't want to hurt our body, right? So we have to recognize when our body is communicating with us that oh, that's happening. That's our body saying, hey, don't have such big of range of motion right now. My goal for all of you is that we learn to listen to our body. We learn what techniques and training and modifications and things that we need to do so we can become stronger, so we can increase our range of motion. That is my goal for all of you, if that is your goal, right? If you're doing, again, a leg drop or straight leg extensions, right? Those are just two common ones that everyone is familiar with, and you're feeling that hip clunk. Well, instead of keep going through that, because as time goes, right, we could have injury and greater dysfunction that can happen. Let's actually be okay, what do I need to do? We need to create stronger pelvis or more balanced pelvis because some areas of your pelvis and hips and legs and core and low back might be too tight where other areas are too weak. And so then we get these imbalances, right? So if we think about our pelvis for a second, your pelvis is bone held together essentially by fascia, right? And muscles, ligaments, all of that, right? But fascia runs through muscles, around muscles. It basically makes up our ligaments and all that. So if we want to really start to think about that, and we think about our pelvis as all these pieces, and if one area or a couple areas countering each other are too tight and too restricted and other areas are too weak, we get these imbalances. And that's where we get the hip clunking. That's where we get hips that are imbalanced, right? No one of us has a perfectly straight alignment. And that's not really the goal either. My goal for all of you is to get you out of dysfunction so you can enjoy life, right? You can move without pain and without dysfunction and really get to do the things that you love to do. This, hip snapping thing seems to be getting a lot of conversation because clearly it's happening for a lot of you. So we need to decrease our range of motion. So why is that? Okay, let's really break this down. So when we shorten our range of motion, we give our body this chance to become stronger and more stable in that range of motion, right? We can't just think all of a sudden we can go run a marathon if we haven't been training at all, right? And doing appropriate training. I mean, yeah, you could just go out and run a marathon. Good luck to you. I hope it goes well. But it's kind of that idea of okay, if something isn't working right or we've got to train our body a certain way, Okay, so we've got to really work to have a smaller range of motion so we can create more strength and stability through our muscular system of our pelvis, of our deep core, which also includes our lower back. I see a lot of people doing, say, leg drops, leg extensions. You get that hip snapping, also overarching in the low back, or jamming the low back. Like, we get compensations. And when we are jamming our back and tucking our pelvis, we're trying to compensate to protect our back. Well, what does that do? It shuts off our pelvic floor, ladies. So we're not getting optimal core function, and we're definitely not getting optimal deep core function, which means how the heck can we stabilize through our pelvis if we're not even engaging our core and our deep core? Our pelvis is the base of our deep core, ladies. You know, I love talking about pelvic floor, and that's why, right? Because it is the foundation of our pelvis, of our entire core. So any of you want strong abs? You need to be listening to what I'm saying today, because this is really, really, really important. It's so much more than just going and doing those crunches and doing those leg drops and doing straight leg extensions, right? I love those. Well, crunches is a whole other conversation for another day. But leg drops, leg extensions can be a great exercise, but you have to work through a range of motion where you can stabilize, because if you don't, and you keep going into that clunking, that hip snapping, guess what? In time, that could really stress the ligaments or be causing more imbalances because of that. So decreasing your range of motion, and in the long term, right, when you're listening to your body, and as you get stronger, your range will increase, right? And it may not always be yes, we've got to create stability and strength through the deep core, through the pelvis, what's going on with our pelvic floor, but also what's going on with our hips themselves, right? So again, I talked about our pelvis is bones held together by fascia, essentially. And then inside of our pelvis are our hip bones, are, the ball and socket joint in there, which again is all tissue all around it, and lots of fascia in between, and the base of our pelvic floor, right? So we start to understand, I need to create a good visual. I'm going to get myself a pelvis here one of these days so I can show you all this a little bit easier. But start to visualize everything in your pelvis has the ability to be improved, to become stronger, become more mobile, but in a way that creates stability, right? So if we think about it, how many of you have one side of your pelvis or your hip or your pelvic floor or your low back that's always just a little bit tighter? Right? You might compensate on that side a little bit more, which means maybe you have a little bit more pain in, say, the opposite SI joint or the other side of the pelvic floor, or that hip over there. Maybe that's the opposite side. The weaker side is the one where you feel that hip snapping, right? The hip popping, because you're not strong enough and stable enough on the weaker side, because the stronger side is always doing more and overcompensating. So this is where we have to find this fine finesse, right? And I don't want to get too deep into talking about stretching today, because I have a whole thought process on that. But long story short, this is really involved in with this, right? So we don't just want to look at the weak side and say, okay, we need to strengthen. We also have to look at the opposite side and be like, well, what's going on with the opposite side? And maybe it's happening with both hips, right? But we want to also then look at, okay, the side that might be more restricted and tighter. We don't just want to stretch it. We want to actually learn how to activate the muscles correctly. I love squats, right? Squats are a great exercise to give your body so much feedback as to what's going on, right? Okay, so if you're doing a wide squat, for example, are you tucking your booty as you're moving up and down? Right? Or do you notice that, oh wow, I can really feel one side of my pelvic floor, underneath my glutes, sits bones, hamstring, quads, like the way it should be, but the other side's a little not really feeling it, right? And so those are the things we need to start bringing more awareness to, because we can work to improve so much function of our body through amazing exercises, but we have to change the thought process, right? We're not just doing those leg drops, those leg extensions, and those squats to have a stronger body, or burn calories, or that can be great to a point. But if you're doing them in a way that is actually leading to more dysfunction, what's the point? Right? So that's where I have such a huge passion for teaching women how to strengthen their body in such a way that is really gentle, really effective, and leading to amazing results, not only now, but teaching your body how to move better. So it's going to be there with you for the rest of your life. And there are things that, yes, you need to practice. But as you start to become stronger, you become more balanced through your body. And again, it's not about perfection, right? right? I get a lot of women, they start core rehab and they're trying to like master everything I'm teaching them. I'm like, no, ladies, like this is taking me like 20-ish years to develop all of this, right? You're not going to learn it all overnight, but just to start being aware of what is going on in your body. And if you're hearing that hip snapping or popping or feeling it, right? Okay, that should be a big signal to your body that's like, okay, well, what am I doing that is, causing it? And the first thing is typically you're just having too much range of motion and we can't stabilize. So make it a goal initially to decrease that range of motion for now, right? And maybe every week that you do it or every time that you do it, you're like, okay, I'm going to go just a little bit farther and see if you can stabilize your pelvis and your core and not go into your back or not tuck your booty, right? We want to have this nice, more neutral-ish pelvis, give or take a little bit. I do find women tend to activate their deep core and pelvic floor with a slight arch in their low back, but not overly arching. So you want to find that fine finesse, right? So no tucking that booty, no overarching that back, right? And keeping your range within a range that you can feel strong and connected, and it's going to get better and stronger and it will go away. Now, there can be so much more to this conversation, but that's kind of the highlights of it. And yes, like my goal for all of you is that if you believe and you want something for your body, for your health, for your movement practice, that it absolutely is possible. I'm here to help give you the tools and facilitate that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like it's you that has to make that decision that like, yes, I want this for my body. And then I'm here to help you, guide you along the way.